everyone. I'm Catherine Mortensen with Americans for Limited Government, and I want to thank you for joining me for this live stream. What we want to talk to you about today is really just a follow-up on what we've been talking about for the last couple of days here. Dr. Anthony Fauci, there is a growing push and a recognition that he needs to resign or be fired. In some way, he needs to be held accountable for what is going on at the National Institutes of Health, that he has been in that role for 37 years as the director for the Center for Allergy and Infectious Disease. And we are starting to learn a lot about him in just the last few days that is really painting a different picture of Anthony Fauci. You know, for the last year and a half, we've all pretty much been subjected to seeing him on our TVs almost every single day. So we kind of feel like we know who he is, that we've come to know him. But the question is do we really know him? Or is he the monster hiding in plain sight? We've told you the last couple of days about experiments involving little puppies, beagle dogs that the NIH funded that were just barbarous, terrible acts of cruelty against these little puppies. And just last week, we learned from the National Institutes of Health that the U.S. taxpayers did, in fact, fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab in China, which Dr. Anthony Fauci has repeatedly testified to Congress that taxpayer money was not involved in that research. So it appears that he is not stating the truth. Do we want to say he is a liar? It's what it would sound like. So now the latest news I have to share with you comes from a new Rasmussen survey. A new survey finds that 47% of Americans believe that Fauci did in fact lie to Congress and to the American people about the gain-of-function research in Wuhan, and 46% think he should resign. So this is really just terrible that he hasn't resigned or that Biden hasn't fired him. And then I want to go into a little bit more about the funding that he greenlighted involving animals, because I think it's been just so soul-crushing to hear about what kind of research Dr. Fauci was funding. And I want to share a video that we can watch together. It's just a 2-minute clip of the Vice President of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. Her name is Kathy Guillermo. She gave an interview just last night with Tucker Carlson at Fox News, talking about these new, just troubling allegations about the research going on at the NIH. So let's watch that together right now.
There's no reason for the disgrace that this experiment is. And unfortunately, it's just the tip of the iceberg of what's going on at NIH. NIH buys thousands of dogs. They subject them to experiments that only Freddy Krueger could think up. And all of this has to change. You know, the last time I was on here with you, I said that NIH Director Francis Collins needs to go. Unfortunately, since then, he's announced his resignation. Now the rest of the NIH directors need to go too.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, my sense from reading a lot about this is that many of these torture sessions, they're not even experiments, it's just torturing animals who love us and can't help themselves. This is driven by funding. So there's money available, so the experiment takes place, but it doesn't necessarily help science or any people. It's just they need to spend the money.
That's what we know, and they spend about $19 billion of it every year on animal experiments, even though we know that these experiments are not going to find cures and treatments for human beings. And if you look at their other laboratories, right inside NIH's laboratory in Maryland, experimenter Elizabeth Murray, as we exposed last year, brain damages monkeys and then tries to frighten them in tiny cages with plastic snakes and spiders. This kind of experimentation goes on all the time. If you look at the Primate Center at University of Washington, they're full-body irradiating monkeys, destroying their immune system completely. And we're all paying for this. There's no reason to do it. It needs to stop.
I feel sick just hearing these stories. Why would anybody, you see people reflexively defend this stuff. Oh, it's science. It's cruelty. It's not science. But why would anyone defend this?
Defending the status quo seems to be the default position of some people, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
That's not how we progress as a society. And we have to get NIH to come to terms with this and remember that their constituency is not the animal experimenters. NIH's constituency is the American public. There's no reason.
So it looks like what's going on here is that the NIH has a lot of money, and there's people out there who want to get access to these grants. And so they propose experiments that match whatever the grant is looking for. And it's all very disturbing. And one of the other things that Tucker brought out, as well as this Kathy Guillermo from PETA, is that the FDA does not require testing on dogs for any of the drugs that are then developed for humans. So nobody has been able to fully explain why we're testing on these dogs. And I'd love for you to comment if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. It looks like Annamaria has something to say. I'll put her comments up. Thanks, Anna, for watching. Our own country was involved and let that virus out for political power. The Democrat Party, they need to be in jail for treason and election fraud, just like the government knew that Cuomo, what he was doing in New York. I'm sure you're not alone, Annamaria. I mean, a lot of us are now beginning to see that our tax dollars were used to fund this gain of function research in China, which many of us believe was the source, the origin for the COVID pandemic. And I don't think that Dr. Fauci has been honest with the American people. And as I said earlier, that a new poll out by Rasmussen, it was done just this week, finds that 47% of Americans don't think Anthony Fauci has been honest on that point. 46% of Americans think that he should resign. No. The problem with the Biden administration, and we have seen this over and over again, from the generals to Fauci and to the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, who's been missing in action for 2 months during this global supply chain crisis, there is no accountability. Joe Biden doesn't seem to hold any of the people accountable who work under him. So, I mean, what kind of satisfaction are we going to get? Do we think he's really going to fire Fauci? The American people, almost half, think that he should resign. But is Fauci, is he so shameless that he won't resign in the face of, what he's dealing with, that he lied to Congress and that he was greenlighting this horrible projects and research against animals? I don't know. I'm not going to hold my breath that he will resign or that Biden will fire him. But I want to share these poll numbers with you so that you know we are not alone. Millions of other Americans agree with us that something is definitely not right with Anthony Fauci and with the image that has been put onto us by the mainstream media. I mean, I don't have to tell you go to jail, Joe. I don't have to tell you that the mainstream media fawns over Fauci. They practically deify him at every opportunity. And so the problem then becomes, as we get evidence that he lied to Congress, he greenlighted really barbarous research projects against animals, will the mainstream or corporate media finally start to write about this stuff? Many years ago, I was a journalism major in college. I had a fabulous professor at the time who tried to explain the role of a journalist or, news outlets. And it was one of the best visual images I've ever had of what reporters are supposed to do. He says, it's like a pendulum. You always want to keep it in the middle. You don't want to swing too far in one direction because you'll end up overcorrecting in the other direction. You see that time and time again, where the media will hold up somebody. And right for the past 18 months, it's been Anthony Fauci. As look at, Lord Anthony, he's so great. He's so wonderful. He saved the world. And then when facts come out that contradict that narrative, sometimes the media will swing wildly in the other direction. Or They just don't want to acknowledge it at all. But in any case, they never should have left the center of the pendulum. News reporters should always stick right down the middle. They should never go wildly one way or the other, because the overcorrections can be just as bad as the initial misreporting. And we see that so often in our media. And this time, with Fauci's lies and the greenlighting of terrible, cruel projects on experiments involving animals, I fear that the media, the corporate media, is just going to ignore the story. But we are urging you to go to getliberty.org, go to our website, and we have some little buttons there on the homepage that you can click on to send a note to Congress that we need to fire Fauci. And if you subscribe to the Daily Torch newsletter we send out each day, we also have a link in there that will allow you to send a note to Congress saying, we need to fire Fauci. This guy cannot be trusted. And I think that more and more Americans, again, as these poll numbers show, are in agreement with us. Again, the Rasmussen Survey finds that nearly half of Americans believe that Anthony Fauci lied about funding virus testing in China, and almost as many want him dumped. So the facts are not in the favor of Dr. Fauci, that's for sure. Now, Fauci does remain popular among Democrats in the Rasmussen Survey. Only 24% of Democrats believe he should be ousted, but among Republicans, that number is 67%. So sadly, like so much in our country, this does remain a political divide where you see Republicans looking at the facts and coming to one conclusion, the Democrats looking at the same set of facts and coming to a totally different conclusion. They think he should keep his job. So, just to kind of wrap it up, Americans for Limited Government believes that Fauci should resign or be fired. We cannot simply ignore his role in funding these barbarous acts of cruelty. And I have a story that's going to be in the Daily Torch tomorrow, in which we look at some reporting that really is decades old. In 2005, the Associated Press reported that Anthony Fauci's NIH green-lighted, get this, terrible research involving foster infants and foster children, mostly minorities and Black little children and babies. And they tested them with experimental drugs, HIV drugs. And I'll just read to you just a little bit from my story tomorrow. And this is what the Associated Press had found years ago. And yes, David agrees, we are a nation divided. Let me tell you a little bit about some of these drugs that these little children were experimented with. And this was, again, under Anthony Fauci had greenlighted these projects. The practice exposed a vulnerable population to the risks of medical research and drugs that were known to have serious side effects in adults and for which the safety for children was unknown. The foster children ranged from infants to late teens, according to interviews and government records. Several studies that enlisted foster children reported patients suffered side effects, such as rashes, vomiting, sharp drops in infection-fighting blood cells, as they tested antiretroviral drugs to suppress AIDS or other medicines to treat secondary infections. Now, again, let me just emphasize, that is reporting that was done in the early 2000s by the Associated Press. And it's just now being brought back into our attention that this are the kinds of research projects that Anthony Fauci greenlighted and helped fund in his role as the director of the National Institutes for Allergy and Infectious Disease. That's a division within the National Institutes of Health. So we are calling on him to resign. I want to thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for your support. If you aren't already a subscriber to our newsletter, go to getliberty.org, subscribe to our daily newsletter, get stories about how big government is really wrecking this country. And then obviously, we would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So again, thanks to everyone for being with us today. We are grateful for all that you're doing to protect our nation. Have a great afternoon.